Okay, so yes, imposter syndrome, I think, is a very hot topic, has been for a couple of years. And it's something that, as a coach, as a facilitator, and just as a human being, I am very interested in because it is all around us and we see it and hear about it in lots of different arenas, in lots of different sectors, from all different types of people. The one thing about imposterism is that it does not discriminate. Everybody is, sort of is potentially up for feeling it at some point in our lives. And it has definitely become something that has come more to the forefront in the last few years as we're starting to think about how we increase our self-awareness and how we think about ourselves as individuals and how we work with other people. So hopefully I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to imposterism. I will share the slides at the end of the session after we finish today. And if you are watching the recording, please do get in touch with me. My details are at the end of the recording to request the slides if you weren't able to be here in person. So let's get into it. We could talk about this. I do a 3-hour masterclass on imposterism, and even that doesn't really cover all the nuts and bolts, the main thing. So I am really just focusing on the key points. Before we start, I think most of you probably will have had some contact with us as an organisation, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about who we are and a little bit about myself in terms of my credentials for delivering this session. So we are a small but impactful, hopefully impactful, learning development provider, and we really focus on helping people to be the best they can be and making a difference where it counts. One of the big things for us is really about helping people to realize their potential, and that's why imposterism is such an important topic for us to talk about, because the imposter can sometimes prevent us from reaching our potential and not realizing our potential, actually, that we have the potential there to reach. So it's really important to us that we try to break down some of those barriers that people have to development and growth, and to stepping it into the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. And when we talk about our name, a lot of people are quite interested and curious about the name, but the word leaderful really is about how leadership is important and available to us all, regardless of our role, regardless of our seniority, and that we can all show elements of leadership in our work on a day-to-day basis. But also the action comes from wherever we are doing, any type of development and growth, any learning. The action is really where we get to see the impact that learning can have. And so it's a really important part of the work that we do. And these are just some, I'm not going to read through all of those, but these are just some of the people that we have worked with and are currently working with. As you can see, a very wide-ranging group, running sessions, delivering coaching, team coaching, coming on to qualifications that we run, ILM qualifications, tapping into our e-learning that we provide. There's quite a few different offers that we provide all of these different clients. So hopefully you are in good company and some of you will work for some of these organizations. So what are we going to cover in this sort of next 30 minutes? We're going to just start by looking at what we mean by imposter syndrome, and we're going to explore how it shows up in individuals, in ourselves, and some of the myths that are out there around imposterism. And then we are going to, I'm just going to share with you 1 or 2 different ways that you can start to listen to and harness your imposter. That's really, really important, that actually you can take away something today that will help you to really sort of make a difference. Okay, so let's just start by thinking about what imposterism is. So the term imposter or the term imposter and the idea of having an imposter came from the work of Plants and Imes back in the 70s, and they identified this phenomenon where which is much more than just a feeling of a lack of self-confidence. It's more than a feeling of a bit of anxiety or a little bit of worry or concern about getting in. That's something that I think everyone will feel at any time in their lives when maybe they're doing something new or something they find difficult, what they recognized was there was this chronic self-doubt that no matter how much evidence there was of the contrary, that people did not believe in their abilities, did not believe that they were good enough, did not believe that they belonged in the position that they were in or doing the things that they're in, this feeling that I'm a fraud, I'm going to get caught out. No matter their level of success, no matter what people said to them, no matter the proof or the facts that were presented to them, they always found a reason and a way to negate that success and to really sort of see it as something that everyone else is going to find out that that's not actually true at some point. Now, you'll hear me talking about, you'll probably hear me using the term imposterism. We do also use the term imposter phenomenon. The reason I have kept imposter syndrome in here is because that is what people recognize, that terminology, but actually it isn't helpful terminology. When we think about a syndrome, we think about an illness. We think about something that is, is we're not able to do anything about, that it is part of us, and there is, we've sort of just got to, it's just something that we can't change or that we can't control. Whereas actually we know that there are things that we can do around our imposterism. So that's why I prefer the term imposterism or imposter phenomenon rather than a syndrome, although most people would probably use the term syndrome. And we can do things about imposterism, and we can harness that imposterism to work for us rather than holding us back. So I think really taking on this idea that our imposter is a part of us, absolutely, is a positive thing, but it doesn't have to be a part of us that is out of our control or a part of us that controls us and that that we can do nothing about. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later on. As I said earlier, if you do have any comments or questions, please do pop them in the chat. I'll pop that over onto my other screen so I can see it a little bit better. And I will try to answer them as best I can as we go through the session. Okay, so what does imposter syndrome or imposterism sound like? And it will sound different to different people, but these are the sort of things as a coach I hear from some of my coachees, or as a person who has experienced and continues to experience imposterism throughout my career. These are the sorts of things you might hear me say from time to time, and I'm sure you can probably relate to one or maybe more of these. So we may hear people saying, one day they'll realize I'm not as good as they think I am. Everyone says nice things, but they don't really know that I'm actually not very good at this. I'm a fraud. I don't deserve to be here. You might hear things like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not academic enough. I'm not good enough. I need more time to get it right. I need to make it perfect. It's not exactly as it should be. I need to work hard, and the harder I work, the more likely it will be perfect. But in reality, it probably will never be perfect. And so that hard work really is just a coping mechanism to enable you to get through whatever task you're working on. Everyone's so much better at this than I am. I'll make a fool of myself if I put myself out there. There's no point in me applying for that job because I'll never get it. I don't have everything that I need. And when you do succeed, things like, I'm just lucky, I was in the right place, the right time, or, oh, it was really just a team effort. It wasn't my success, it was the team's success. And you might actually hear nothing from individuals who are suffering from imposterism because they will not feel like they are good enough to speak up. They may be in meetings where they might be the most expert person in the room, but they won't say anything. They'll defer to others because they don't feel like their contributions matter or that they're going to be the right things to say. So it comes up for lots of different people in lots of different ways. And when we start to hear these sentences, these phrases, start to see this in other people, we can start to think about how how that imposterism is impacting them or impacting ourselves. And only when we start to listen out for these phrases, or we start to see and recognize imposterism, can we start to do something about it, which we will talk about in a little while. So recognizing it and picking it out in the moment is really key. And if you have an imposter, then you are in good company. So these are just a handful. I could have done 50 slides probably on different people who are incredibly well known for being excellent in their field, being top of their game, being highly intelligent, highly driven, very overachieving individuals, and yet have all come out and said, I have an imposter. So I'll just give you a moment to have a little look at those and have a think about what that means for you, really, in terms of, wow, all of these amazing, high profile, intelligent people, they suffer from imposterism themselves. So maybe it's not quite the deficit or the barrier that we think it might be. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some theory around imposterism, and this comes from the work of Dr. Valerie Young. She, in her research, identified that there were 5 different types of imposter, and that for most of us with a feeling of imposterism, we might feel that we align with one or maybe even more of these. From personal experience, I would say that I have experienced all of those at some point in my life. Possibly the least would be the soloist, but actually probably have experienced all of those versions of imposterism at some point. And the point of, again, exploring this is really so that we can identify it, and we can identify the things that we say that show us that we are falling into one of these categories, so that then we can take the steps that we need to harness it and counteract the effects or the negative effects of imposterism. So I'll give you a very, very, very brief overview of these 5. There's lots of information on these 5, lots of videos you can watch and articles if you want to know a little bit more, but just to give you a flavour for what these all look and sound like. So we've got the perfectionist. I sort of mentioned that a few slides ago, where that person is always trying to make it better. They're never really happy or satisfied with a piece of work. They maybe take a very long time producing anything because they're being very meticulous about the work that they're doing, and even when they hand over an excellent piece of work, they will probably hand it over saying, oh, it's still in draft, it's really not finished, because they're so concerned that it's not perfect. And if they don't have that level of perfectionism, which they never will have because they're always striving for more, then it is a complete failure. It's all or nothing. The expert really needs to know everything about something, and this has been something that as a facilitator myself, I've fallen foul of. So feeling like I have to know everything about the topic that I'm talking about, so that I can make sure that I can answer any tricky questions, so that I can really show my level of knowledge, so I can show my expertise. But again, it's very difficult to create that level of expertise to the point where you know everything about a subject and that you can stay up to date and current. So that expert imposter is always berating themselves because they don't know everything about everything. They can't accept that actually they know enough. They want to know everything. The soloist really is about, if I haven't been doing this piece of work on my own, if I haven't driven it, if I haven't been the main instigator, or if I'd had any help whatsoever, then I would feel like it wasn't my success, and I would feel like I'd failed because I needed help. The natural genius is about if I've had to struggle to get that knowledge or that skill, if I have if it's not come easy to me, then I'm not good enough. The natural genius really wants to be able to pick things up like that, to be able to do things with effortlessly, to be able to know everything really easily, to be a very natural, to be a natural at that particular task, or know that knowledge. And then the superhuman is really based on being everything to everyone, and doing a million and one things, so that they're sort of being as effective and helpful and amazing in all elements of their life. And it really has to be all elements of their life, and feeling like if they drop the ball in one area, then they're a failure. So if they drop the ball in their personal life, then that's a problem. If they drop a ball in their work life, then that's a major issue. So they really need to feel like they are doing everything perfectly, brilliantly, and helping everybody to the best of their ability all of the time. So I don't know if you can identify with one of those. Maybe give me a little bit of a hands up, or a little reaction there, to tell me if you think you can recognize that either in yourself or in someone else, just so I can see if everyone is on board with. Yeah, lovely, thanks all. Fantastic. So maybe you can spot one that's your Achilles heel. Maybe you've dipped in to all 5 of those. I certainly have. I'm going through the natural genius myself at the moment. I'm learning to play the drums, and having been fairly musical for most of my life, being able to pick up instruments and being able to play them a little bit, the drums is a whole new ball game. And I couldn't understand after 3 lessons, mind, that I wasn't playing the drums like as if I'd been playing for 20 years. But again, it's just reminding myself that that's my imposter rearing its ugly head and saying, you're putting yourself out there, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. Okay, so that's the theory. I want you to just keep those in mind. I'll remind you of them later when we do our reflection, but really thinking about what that sounds like for you. So if you identify with the expert, how does that show up for you? What does your inner monologue say to you when that expert imposter is sort of popping up? Or if you're the superhuman, what sort of things do you find yourself telling yourself? Or maybe if it's somebody else, what do you hear from other people that lets you know that they're falling into that superhuman imposterism? Okay. So just really want to talk about some myths and misconceptions, and then we're going to get right into some of the things that you can do. We've talked about the syndrome bit already. There is a misconception that only women have it. There is no evidence to suggest that that is anywhere near the case. I think what we know is that different people experience it in different ways, and it's not just a gender difference in terms of how people experience it. There's all sorts of differences. As I said at the beginning, it does not discriminate, and I have seen people in all walks of life who have experienced some form of chronic self-doubt, self-sabotage, feelings of fraudulence, and it really is not a female-only phenomenon. What we also see, though, is because I guess the way that we've been socially conditioned is that women will probably verbalize it slightly more. So we're more open about talking about it, but that doesn't mean that men do not experience it. They may experience it in a different way, or they may experience it and not really talk about it. Already talked about the third point around it's not just having a little bit of self-doubt, just about to go into an exam and thinking, oh, can I do it? It really is debilitating. And again, with different degrees, it might stop you from doing things. It might stop you from applying for that job. Or when you apply for that job and you go for the interview, you're a bag of nerves because it's really taken over this idea. You just keep telling yourself, I'm never going to get the job. I'm a fraud. They're going to see through me. It isn't the same as social anxiety, and it isn't the same as other mental health conditions. They can be interlinked, and somebody could have, anxiety, depression, other mental health conditions alongside having an imposter, but they aren't the same thing, and they do, it's not the case that they are sort of that one causes the other. And the other one is, quite a lot of people say, oh, you just got to pull yourself together. You're letting this get one over on you. And this idea that, we allow ourselves to become debilitated. Our minds are incredibly strong, and we're going to go on and talk a little bit about the benefits of the imposter, because actually the imposter is the part of our brain that's trying to keep us safe. It's a survival mechanism. It's that part of our brain that says, whoa, this is scary, this is risky, this could have some implications for you. You could embarrass yourself here, or you're putting yourself out there and it may come back and bite you on the backside. So it's a natural part of our psyche to have this survival mechanism inside us to prevent us from risky situations and from situations where we might socially ostracize ourselves. So it's not our fault if we have it, but we can do something about it. And that's not to say if you don't do something about it, that's your fault. That's just to say that actually there's some power there, that if we want to be able to change it, we absolutely can. Okay, let's move on. So, as I mentioned, there are some possible benefits, though. We quite often talk about imposterism as something that is debilitating, that holds us back, and that is negative. But there are those positives. Otherwise, our brain would not have created it and evolved in that space. So again, the benefits will be different for different people, depending on where the imposterism shows up, depending on our own personalities, depending on sort of our experiences. But these are some key ones which I just want to quickly talk about. It can be a real driving force. So if you think about those perfectionists, those superheroes, this imposterism is pushing them to be the best that they can possibly be. So it pushes them to revise. It pushes them to go and learn more. It pushes them to, sort of crave knowledge and skill and to be the best that they can possibly be. So it can be a real motivating and driving force. It certainly has been for me over the years. It's pushed me into spaces that I never would have dreamed that I would have gone, because I have been striving for that more knowledge, more information, to try to become better at what I do every day. It really helps us to reflect and to prepare. So that imposter saying, you're going to get found out, yes, it might mean that you are taking a bit too long to prepare, and we do need to balance that up, that we don't allow it to take over and we're up until 3 o'clock in the morning preparing for something, when actually we could have stopped at 11 and it wouldn't have made all that much difference to the end result. But it does mean that we think about, right, what can I possibly do here to make sure my risk of failure is as minimum as possible? And it also makes us reflect on our skills and our knowledge and our experience. So it's a really good way of helping us to reflect, prepare, and develop. It stops us from making rash decisions and taking rash actions, and really helps with our risk assessment and keeps us safe psychologically, safe socially, and safe physically as well. We also sometimes, I've definitely seen people do this, and I've probably done it myself, we can use it to reduce expectation. That example I gave earlier, where you've spent hours and hours and hours on a report and you hand it to somebody and you say, oh, but it's not completely finished. Whereas actually, we've probably put in far more effort and time than we needed to. But what that does is it means that when it comes back and maybe there's some changes, we can go, well, it's okay, because actually I knew it wasn't finished anyway. So it's also, it gives us a bit of a get out clause, really, when things don't quite go to plan. And all of those things means that imposterism sometimes works for us, and that's what we talk about in harnessing it, really, and using it, identifying it and using it to do one of those things. If we think, actually, I really want to get great at XYZ, then that imposter voice, we can really harness that to push us in that direction. Or I really want to reflect on my skills in this. We can use our imposterism to sort of help us, and we'll talk about how we do that in a moment. Okay, hopefully that's so far that's all okay, and everyone's up to speed with where we're at with that. Do pop any questions. I can see some of you have popped some things in the chat. Thank you for that, and great to see those comments there. I can definitely identify with most aspects of 4 of them at times, and definitely the superhuman. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, keep any questions coming in as we go through. Let's talk about what we can do about it, though. It's all well and good understanding it, but what are we actually going to do about it? So there's a full list there, and I'd love to have more time to go into all of those. We are going to focus on the first one, understanding and acceptance. But all of these other ones are really, really important. And if you did want to, have any additional reading on any of these, do let me know. Some key things though, just really quickly, I think focusing on strengths is very, very powerful. So whenever you hear that imposter coming up and saying, oh, you're not good at this, you're not good at the drums, or you're not good at report writing, or you're not good at Excel, really identifying what it is you are good at and utilizing those strengths within that task, within that, within that experience, focusing on what you can do to take some of the limelight off what you feel you're not doing. I think the other one for me that's really, really important, well, actually the two at the bottom, opening up and talking about it. Let's make it normal, because actually it is a normal human behavior. It's normal for us to for that survival instinct to kick in. And when we start to talk about it and normalize it, it can have less of a hold on us, and it can be something that we can, sort of be really practical about, and we can utilize to work for us. And then having some self-compassion and remembering that it's okay to feel this way, and that, it's just that little voice that's saying to us, be careful, watch out. And again, sort of look at how we can do that in a minute. So those are some different ways that you could look into, and let me know if you want any additional information on them. But let's just focus on that first one, understanding and acceptance. So this is where we're going to do a little bit of a self-reflection exercise. Hopefully you've got your pen and paper, or if you're using a tablet, then please get that ready. I'm going to ask you to think about a couple of things, and I want you to just jot some of your thoughts down. We'll do this for a couple of minutes before we finish off the talk element of the session. So let's start with the first question then. Which types do you most associate with? So remember, you've got the expert, the soloist, the natural genius, the superhuman, and the perfectionist. Which types come up for you and when? Sometimes in certain elements. So my example of the drums, the natural genius doesn't come up for me very often. It does come up for me in the music sphere, because that's always something I've considered myself to be fairly good at, but it probably wouldn't come up in, I don't know, if I was learning how to lay a patio. Not that I'm ever going to do that, but I'm no good at DIY in my head, so the natural genius would never sort of rear its head there. Probably the perfectionist might, because I'd want to make sure everything was nice and straight and properly level and all those sorts of things. So really think about what types come up when for you, and I'll just give you a few seconds to jot a few things down there. Okay, so we'll move on. You can always come back to the recording and do this in a little bit more depth if you need to. The next question is, what are some of the underlying causes for you? Like, where does it come from? Are you new in a post, perhaps, or has your role changed? And so there's that maybe unsettling feeling that is creating some of this imposterism to be very present for you at the moment. Does it come up when you're feeling stressed or tired? Does it come up when you haven't had a lot of social connection and you really need social connection? Does it come up when you are doing certain activities that you feel less comfortable with? What are the, for want of a better word, what are the triggers that brings up your imposter? Okay, this is all about understanding your imposter, knowing what it looks and sounds like, where it comes up for you, so that you can be on the lookout for it. So yeah, the next question, I suppose, is similar to the last one. What makes it worse? I'm certainly much worse when I have got multiple big pieces of work and I don't feel like I'm really giving any of them the time that they need. And I feel like I'm failing in all of them, then my imposter comes up and starts shouting in my ear. What makes it worse for you? And if you can recognize it from previous experiences, what helps? What makes it better? So for me, usually having a chat with my line manager is really useful, or my coach. Also, taking some time to switch off. It's really beneficial, puts everything back into perspective. And then remembering my strengths really helps as well. Can you identify anything from past experiences with imposterism that seems to have turned the tide for you, that has helped it to quieten down? How is it serving you? What benefits are you seeing? How is it helping you in your day to day? Is it giving you a get out clause? Is it driving you forward and pushing you to new and better things? And what does it cost you? What is it stopping you from doing? Has it stopped you from going for that job interview? Has it stopped you from putting your hand up in a meeting to get involved in a project that you actually really wanted to be involved in? Okay. So again, you can go back to any of those questions, delve in a little bit more to help you to understand your imposter. That is step one, always with imposterism, is really getting to know what it looks like, sounds like, where it comes from, how it shows up, when it shows up, the sorts of things that it says to you, how it helps you, how it hinders you, and how you help it, and what makes it worse. And once we understand that and we can spot it in the moment, then we can start to do some of the other things, which I'm going to talk about really briefly now. Interestingly, this is a brand new slide that I popped in today because I received the CIPD newsletter this week, and in there, Manager Imposterism or Manager Imposter Syndrome, brand new article from the CIPD. And as I read it, it just confirms everything that I believe about imposterism. And I just love this quote. We don't want to get rid of our imposter. Our imposter is what drives us. Our imposter makes us better. Our imposter gives us that opportunity to reflect. And if we can shift our focus from trying to suffocate our imposter, to tell our imposter to go away, to trying to ignore our imposter, and instead focus our attention on how we can make it our friend, how we can make it our superpower, as Darren says. You know, how can we really harness it? And this is, this is really about understanding it and utilizing it in the moment. So one tool that you can use for this, and this is only one tool, there are many, many other things that I'd love to share with you, but just in the interest of time, is acceptance and commitment. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy, but I want you to forget about the therapy bit because we're not doing therapy. It's the acceptance and commitment part that I'm focusing on. So this is a really interesting development in the world of psychology over the last sort of 20 odd years, whereby we are moving away from this idea that our thoughts are bad or good, that thoughts are just thoughts and thoughts are neutral, that it's normal to have thoughts that are maybe helpful or less helpful. It's not about trying to move from a state of negative thinking or these thoughts are bad, so I need to stop having these thoughts and have better thoughts. It's more about this idea of, well, I'm having thoughts and I can choose what I do with those thoughts, and I can use them to help me in whatever way I need them to help me. And this all comes from the work of Russ Harris. Again, I can lead you into some, other reading if you want to read a bit more. But essentially, what we take away from that is thinking about that acceptance piece. So now we know and understand our imposter, we can start thinking about how we can accept that. So we accept that we have an imposter and we don't try to get rid of it. We don't try to push it down. We don't try to change those thoughts. We just listen to those thoughts. So, okay, that my imposterism is coming up now and saying, who are you to be talking about acceptance and commitment therapy? You're not a psychotherapist. You're not a psychologist. Who are you to be doing this? And then just recognizing that and saying, okay, so that is about my brain kicking in that survival function of saying, make sure you don't say anything that's out of your wheelhouse, and make sure that you don't pretend to be somebody you're not, and make sure that you give the right information and that you are able to answer the key questions that come in. Thanks very much, brain. That's really helpful, because then I just make sure that I know what I need to know, and I can, I can refer to places further on if people need more in-depth information. And that's all that is. It's just about listening to that thought, not seeing it as a negative thought, not beating yourself up about it, not finding ways to make it mean something, just saying, thanks thought, I'm having this thought because it's doing this for me. And that's okay. It's going to help me to prepare even more. So that's what that sort of flow chart on the right hand side is really about, just really accepting it. You can name the emotion if you know what the emotion is, or if you know what the thought is. Think about what it's doing for you. For some people, this is a little woo-woo, but it's quite a nice thing. Thanks, thought. That's really helpful. It almost just, what it does is it creates what Harris calls cognitive diffusion. So it takes you and that thought and it rips it apart. It stops you from thinking, I am my thoughts, or feeling that I am my thoughts. It takes that thought and says, yeah, that's fine. I can take that outside. It's not me. It's not all I am. It's not a fact. It's just a belief. It's just something that's popping into my head. It's just a thought, and I can accept it and I can just move on. I can use it to my own advantage and I can move on. Okay, so that's what I'd like you to think about. The next time an imposter thought comes into your mind, I'd like you to think, what is it doing for me? And then I'd like you to thank it for whatever it's bringing into your life, and then move on. And if you practice that enough, it becomes something that becomes easier over time. If you think you're going to really struggle with it, write it down as a process to follow, or get somebody to call you out on that. So my coach was the person who really helped me to get into the swing of doing this. She would quite often say to me, what's your imposter saying to you? When I used to come into my coaching session and say, oh, I'm not sure if I want to do this, or when I was thinking about moving roles and stuff like that, what's your imposter saying? She really helped me. So if it would be helpful for you to have somebody who is your sort of your sounding board, explain this situation to them and ask them to help you to identify its function and thank it and move on. Okay. We will come to questions in a moment. So before we wrap up, I just want you to have a little think. It was a very quick whistle-stop tour. That's probably the quickest I've ever talked about imposterism over the last few years. So I do hope I've given you a little bit of an insight and a few things that you can think about moving on from today. I would love you to just take a moment to reflect on what we've covered and think about anything you might try to start doing, anything you will stop doing, or anything you will continue doing to help you to fully understand and or harness your imposterism. So I'll just give you 60 seconds to do that. Or maybe not quite that long, just give you a couple of seconds to think about that and write that down. Okay. So I'll stop the recording in a minute so you can ask some questions, but just so that everyone's got can see this slide before I switch off the recording. We really love hearing from people who have watched our webinars or been involved in our webinars, so please do stay in touch. Follow us. LinkedIn's usually the best place. We are on Facebook and Instagram, but I've got to be honest, we probably spend most of our time on LinkedIn. I am pretty active on LinkedIn myself, so I'd love to connect with people. If you want to use that QR code to get my own personal LinkedIn profile and connect with me, if you aren't already, that would be really great. And I will be sharing this on YouTube for you to go back on